Hi guys, I'm making you a video and this one is from home. So you might hear a dog, you might hear a cat. We'll hope for the best and here it goes. So I wanted to review air masses because there was some confusion while you were taking the quiz and I wanted to make sure this is cleared up in your head. An air mass is just that. It's a big massive blob of air and it's an air mass because the air that's in this section, this clump of air that shows up, has a similar temperature, it has a similar humidity, it's similar in just about every way. And we have four basic descriptors for air masses. Maritime, which means it's over water. Continental, which means it's over land. Do not get confused. It can be on the coast and have some land and some water. And for those, if it's close to water, we're still going to say maritime because it's going to be pulling from the water. If it is on land and we're not touching water, there's no water influencing this air mass, it's going to be continental and it's going to be dry. Our other two descriptors are polar and tropical. If I'm thinking of polar, I think cold polar bear. Tropical, I think of vacation, tropical island. So polar is going to be in the northern polar regions, and tropical is going to be closer to the equator in places on Earth that tend to be warmer. So air masses are key because when air masses interact, when they touch, when they collide, this is when we get weather events. And that's what's coming up next. So when we have a cold air mass move in, air masses that are cold move fast. They are aggressive. Their symbol is that blue line with the blue like triangles. Think of like blue jagged sharp teeth biting through, right? Rah, here comes the cold front. The air mass is behind the line. So the shapes that point in the direction that the air is moving. That's where it's going. Behind those shapes, on the side that doesn't have the triangle, that's where your cold air mass is. The line of the front, this is where the weather happens. So when the cold air mass moves in and slams into that warm air mass, it's more dense, it's under the warm air mass, it pushes the warm air mass up, but while the two touch, you have severe storms like thunderstorms, really heavy rains. If it's cold enough, we get snow, maybe heavy snow. These are like bigger storm events. Not crazy, we're not in occluded fronts yet, but like a really heavy downpour, that's probably a cold front. And because the cold air mass is behind the line, then we have colder temperatures after. Let's look at a stationary front. A stationary front is, we've got almost like two equally matched air masses. We've got a cold air mass and a warm air mass. And it doesn't really matter which one's on which side. It's like they're playing tug of war. But if you look at the symbol, like the symbol that's on this page, if you notice, I have the red bumps on this side. That means over here on behind those shapes, that's where my warm air mass is located. I see I have a blue triangle here. That means behind that is where my cold air is, just like in this picture. So the cold air is on this back side and the warm air is on this other side. It's on the opposite side of the shape. And that's the direction those air masses are moving. They're playing tug of war. And because stationary means you're not moving, a stationary front feels like it doesn't move. It just sits there. And we get many days of cloudy weather, rainy weather, drizzly weather. Not a very aggressive weather system, but still kind of annoying. Then we get occluded fronts. These are a little more exciting. We have a cold air mass, we have a warm air mass on top, and we have a colder air mass behind it. So we have cold, warm, and colder. Those two cold air masses are at the bottom because they're more dense. And the warm air mass is trapped up between them, up at the top. Where these touch, we get weather. Remember, on the front is where we get the precipitation. Okay? On the front, right at the line, where these meet, this is where we get the precipitation happening. So in an occluded front, we have like heavy rain, heavy storms, tons of snow. And because this is a spinning like set of air masses, we could end up with funnel clouds. This is like an intense storm. So if you see that purple symbol on the weather map, this means we have more stuff going on in this particular weather front. And then the last one is a warm front. Warm fronts are less aggressive. Remember, think a blanket. It swoops in over the cold front because the warm air is less dense. It's at the top. It pushes out the cold air in the bottom. The air mass is behind the shapes. So I draw the shapes pointing in the direction that the air mass is moving. The warm air is back behind that line. This line is where the two air masses meet. That line is the front. This is one air mass, this is the other. The line where they meet is the front, and this is where we see precipitation. Warm fronts bring us drizzly rain, and they end up with warmer temperatures. Let's look at a map that shows two air masses getting ready to interact. At the top of this picture, we have a continental polar air mass. So we have dry, cold air moving down through the United States. At the bottom of the picture, we have a maritime tropical. So this means we have a moist, warm air mass down here moving up through the United States. When these two air masses meet right here, right where these two arrows are getting ready to touch, I could draw a line between these two air masses and we would have a weather front. So you saw this diagram on your quiz and it got you really confused. It shouldn't have, because this just shows you exactly what we've been talking about. We have a cold air mass and it's under this bubble because remember, cold air is more dense, so it sits at the bottom. You have a warm air mass, see it's labeled here, and the warm air mass is here in between the two. Where this cold air mass and this warm air mass touch on this line, this is where we have the front. This is where we get the precipitation. And I could draw blue jaggedy lines on this line because this cold air mass moving in, this line is a cold front. Over here we have the warm air mass moving in up over a cold air mass. And because it's moving up and over the cold air mass, it's going to push that air out on this line. This is our front. This would be a warm front. So I could draw those scallopy, like blankety edges on the side of this. All right, so let's look at this in action. We've got a weather map. We have a cold front symbol here. Remember, it's like the sharp teeth biting through. I know that it's moving. This is moving to the right because of the direction these triangles are pointed. Behind this is where my cold air mass is, and I can look back here for like validation. Yep, that says CP. That means it's continental polar. The cold air is sitting behind this weather front. Up here I have a warm front. I know that the warm front is moving north. It's moving up because of the direction of these half circles. This shows me that the warm air is behind this line, and I have validation here because I see MT, maritime tropical. So that tells me my warm air is here. This cold air mass, this continental polar, is touching the warm air right here, and that's why we have a cold front right here. This line is where the weather's happening. Well, the like active. This is where our precipitation is happening. So if I were asked on this map, what location by letter A, B, C, or D is getting precipitation, I know for certain that location B is getting precipitation because it's sitting right here in a cold front. And I could also tell you it's probably thunderstorms or heavy rain because I know cold fronts are aggressive. When I look up here at the warm front, Location D is getting ready to get some precipitation. If I had to pick two, I would pick D as my second choice because it's in the direct path of a front. This location is probably going to get some drizzly rain and in a couple of days some clear skies and warmer air. See, they're getting warmer air, clear skies. There's no weather front at this location. Location A, they've got cooler temperatures and probably some clear skies because there's no weather front at this location. You need to use the information you know. You know continental polar means cold air. It's sitting behind the front. This is where the precipitation is happening. Over here we have maritime tropical, that's warm air. It's sitting behind this front. It's what's moving up north. This line right here is where we're getting the drizzly rain from the warm front. Let's look at one more map. Let's look at this front right here. I have a stationary front. I know this is a stationary front because I have alternating warm front symbol and cold front symbol. If I want to know which side I have a warm front, I go to the warm front symbols and I go on the other side. So back here on this side of the weather symbol is where I have warm air, and the warm air is moving in this direction. I can look at my temperatures, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. On this side of the weather front, I will have cold air because this is my cold front symbol. Behind the symbol is where I have colder air back here. And sure enough, I have 30s, 20s, 0. So I have a cold air mass back here, a warm air mass over here, and right here on this line, all the places that are being touched by this front are getting drizzly rain or clouds for days. Let's jump over here. This shows me I have a cold front, and because my arrows are pointed in this direction, I look behind this, behind the line, and that's where I have my cold air mass. In the 40s, we can even go back a little further, right? We've got 30s. It's colder air behind this line. On this line, so on the line of the front is where I have precipitation, and that's where I'm going to have maybe, I would say rain because I'm not in the 30s over here. So we're having heavy rain, heavy storms. Let's look up here again, and we've got another stationary front. Cold air is behind it because I'm going the opposite side of my triangle shapes. The cold front's back here. And my warm air is on the other side because I'm going to go on the opposite side of the symbols. It's helpful as a review for the air masses and weather fronts. The next video I'm going to post is going to talk about weather tools and prediction. Remember, if you have questions, please ask your teachers. That's what we're there for.